All right. Hi, everyone. You're welcome again to the LSE Africa Summit 2021. I'm sure you've heard a few welcomes, but welcome again. And very specifically, you're welcome to this panel titled Grassroots Movement from the Ground Up. I'm personally really excited to get into this conversation. But first of all, I should introduce myself. My name is Teniola Tayo. I was at the LSE not too long ago, actually. I studied international development, the MSc. And I'm a researcher with a think tank in Dakar, Senegal. But first of all, I'm Nigerian. And last year, I'm sure a lot of us know that there was something that happened in Nigeria in October 2020. There were a series of protests, the NSAS protests, where young people were fighting against police brutality, but also wider governance issues. I was in Senegal when this happened, but because I am Nigerian, I found myself drawn into the midst of this protest, and I interestingly even tried to organize a mini protest here, where I picked some of my friends and we went to one of the popular sites in Senegal, the Monument de la Renaissance Africaine, I said that correctly. So that's the Monument of African Rebirth. We did a mini protest there, to support our people back home. But I had no idea, last year in October 2020, that Senegal itself would find itself in the midst of protest in some months to come. So very recently in Senegal, we had the Free Senegal protest. It started as a protest against, political oppression. So the perception that the government was being oppressive against the opposition with the arrest of a man called Ousmane Sonko. But then again, that was the initial issue. It became a wider issue of governance and inequality, economic inequality in the country. Being part of the NSAS, even virtually somewhat, and then finding myself as part of the Free Senegal protest because I was at home in my apartment in Dakar and I heard explosions, just one night. And Senegal is not a country where you hear explosions just randomly. I was very concerned. I went online, I asked people, and then I heard that maybe there were tear gas canisters. And I said, tear gas in Dakar, what's going on? Everyone was shocked. That night, I received a message from my organization saying everyone work from home for the next few days. And it was almost like there was a collective shock at what was happening in Senegal. But I think very quickly people realized that, there were very legitimate concerns. And this was an attempt to get the government to listen and to get the international community to listen. Being part of these two movements made me begin to ask myself the question of, okay, how do we even make change happen? We had the NSAS protest, we had the Free Senegal protest, and people died, so people lost their lives. How do we make sure that we consolidate the gains from these movements? How do we make sure that we are moving the needle on something and not just, going a few steps forward and some steps backwards? And I'm really glad that we have such an incredible panel to tackle this issue today. I'll be introducing them very quickly. So first of all, we have Esther Mwema. Esther Mwema is an artist whose drive is to build tools towards girls' safety and to increase digital citizenship in local communities. She has a platform that she calls Digital Grassroots. She's concerned with addressing inequalities as an Atlantic Fellow for Social and Economic Equity based at the London School of Economics. She's an Open Internet for Democracy leader, a Mozilla Festival ambassador, and wrangler in AI wellness space. She's also a youth leader in the UN Women Generation Equality Action Coalition for Technology and Innovation for Gender Equality. She has published literary fiction under her pen name, Hadassah Lewis. Esther, it's a pleasure to have you on this panel.
Thank you so much, Teniola. It's such a privilege.
Thank you. I will now go to Joey. So we have Joey Hasson. He's an activist, a strategist, and researcher who specializes in community organizing, law and public engagement to advance economic and social justice. Over the last 10 years, Joey has worked across a range of systemic campaigns to improve public education, sanitation, housing, and health services. He has worked with the Treatment Action Campaign in South Africa, with Amnesty International in the UK, and he's the co-founder of the Equal Education Movement in South Africa as well. Joy is Activist Training Manager. That's a very interesting title, so I'd like to hear a bit more about that later. So he's the Activist Training Manager with the 100 Million campaign, which mobilizes to end the exclusion and exploitation of the world's most marginalized youth and promotes their access to education. Thank you very much for joining us, Joey. You're welcome.
Very good to be here. Thank you.
Now, Jake Epelle, I hope I have said that correctly. I practiced a few times. Jake Epelle has learned over the years the skill sets for bridging the gap between the three tiers of government and underserved. Extremely important. He is the founder of the Albino Foundation, established in 2006. The Albino Foundation is principally an organization established for persons with albinism and other vulnerable groups, such as persons with disabilities. TAF is a special focus organization advocating for the recognition and respect of the rights and socioeconomic inclusion of people living with albinism. Presently, it has a nationwide network of 42 chapters. That's incredible. Congratulations. A strong national and international recognition, including with the UN systems. Jake Epelle has a natural ability to develop and build strong network support groups and facilitate sustainable advocacy drive in any given cause. It's an honor to have you here, Jake. You're welcome to this panel.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I don't know how. I think I didn't update the profile before I sent it. We are currently 56 chapters across the country.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. And the last, but absolutely not the least, Seun Kuti. He is a pro-tem chairman of Movement of the People and the CEO at Egypt 80. I would like to hear a little bit more about that, if possible. He is the youngest son of Afrobeat's godfather, Fela Anikulapo Kuti, and a Nigerian musician. But I would say he's a Nigerian musician, but also the son of Afrobeat's godfather, Fela Anikulapo Kuti. Before the NSAS protest, he has organized Nigerians to get them to gain political and social consciousness, and he founded the Niger Resistance Movement. It's a Pan-Africanist organization poised to inform and educate the people on the inevitability of a Pan-Africanist agenda to fulfill destiny. That is very interesting. You're very welcome, Seun. I'm glad you've been able to join.
Yeah, thanks. It was a bit of a, because I didn't have the app, but I'm here now. I'm happy to be on the panel.
I'm glad. This new normal, this new normal will not, affect us. We'll phase around it. Again, we're all welcome to this panel, and I'd like us to give, very brief opening statements. Because the audience may not know you very well, I'd like you to speak about your particular movement. So everyone on this panel represents one, grassroots movement or the other. I'd like you to talk about your movement. How long has it been in existence? We've heard that Jake started his movement in 2006. What are you trying to achieve? But then I would like to hear a story from you. So I'd like to know when exactly you knew you were going to start the movement. Were you eating breakfast, a few years ago, and you thought, oh my God, I am going to start something about this, So I'd like to hear the story of when you started your movement and the things that led you to do that. We have very little time, so please keep it as brief as possible. Esther, we'll start with you.
So, can you hear me? So thank you so much, Teniola, for that amazing introduction, and it's such a privilege to be with all of you on this stage. And I count it as a privilege, first of all, because of my background as a young Black female immigrant. So I was an immigrant since the day I was born, and growing up, it felt like I was a stranger all my life. But most importantly, what really drove me to this movement, or to start working on girls' safety and also on issues of digital inclusion, is that when we look at grassroots movement, Black women are at the center of it. Even before we started going online with online advocacy, it's Black women who have been organizing. We've been putting our bodies on the front line. And why are we doing this? It's because the world we live in does not value us at the same level, and we have to fight for our own rights, our own dignity. I started Safety First for Girls when I was 17 years old, and it was when you start thinking of feminism, I didn't even know the word feminism when I was 17 years old in 2012. So when I was at university, I saw how my education did not prepare me for the real world, how it didn't tell me that I was a Black woman. It didn't tell me that I was an immigrant. It didn't tell me that I would be treated differently from everyone else. So when all these accumulated to me, when I was at university studying journalism, it made me realize that I've got to change this because nobody's going to do it for me. So I started working on girl safety, and because I didn't know anywhere to start, I started using an online blog called Safety First for Girls, and that's how my digital advocacy started. This was even before many people were using online advocacy. And as the years went by, I realized that not everyone is online. Women are the gender digital divide is really high. So it didn't make sense for me to be bringing tools for girl safety online, even wanted to reach more girls when they couldn't access the internet and there's this digital divide. So I started Digital Grassroots, and that's where we started working to increase digital citizenship with focus on girls. And I realized as the years went by is that offline issues are reflected online. So the inequalities we see offline, the gender disparity, the abuse, the lack of dignity is being reflected online. And as a Black woman, it was very important for me that I bring intersectional digital feminism into this space and work with different stakeholders to ensure that the digital divide is bridged, and not only that, that the online space remains safe for all women and girls and young people. As the years have gone, we've seen last year with COVID-19, everything went online, but there's still a big gap on who can succeed online. We're seeing that the people who are succeeding offline are the ones who are succeeding online. And what has happened now with grassroots movements is that we as Black women, we as grassroots and young people, we were able to advocate offline, but moving online, there was a new barrier. Not only did we have to put our bodies on the line, we have to now put our economy. Because I was just thinking, like, in the recent weeks, I would be cooking a meal on one side, and on the other side, I'll be on a Zoom call, and on another side, I'll be on my phone on Slack organizing. And this, for me, I see is a privilege because I am able to even have the devices. I'm able to have the money to do it. But for the grassroots organizers, there is this divide where they might not have the devices. Internet is super expensive. And there's just also a social norm where we're not able to have the same access to these digital tools, these competencies that require us to succeed online. Something as simple as knowing how to create an email or how to be safe online, because we know that online organizers, digital feminists, get a lot of flack, a lot of shitstorms. And so it's been a very challenging time growing up in this space and seeing this movement growing. And now, as a youth leader in the Action Coalition for Technology and Innovation, I am working with young people to make sure that by 2026, we reduce the gender digital divide by half. We increase investments towards
I think Sarah just lost her connection.
And
Sarah, are you back?
We make sure that the majority of countries and tech demonstrate accountability and solutions against online gender-based violence. So that's my brief introduction. I don't know if I've got.
No, thank you for that. That was brilliant. We just lost you again. I'm glad to see you back. Don't worry, this is a usual thing for online events. We'll always find our way around the challenges. Thank you for that, Sarah. That was brilliant. Esther, that was brilliant. You know, I related a bit with it because last year we tried to organize an online festival and we realized the people that we could reach were very limited. You know, if you're trying to reach everyone, the internet often is not the best platform. So I really admire the work that you're doing. Because I know Seun is also having some internet challenges, we'll go to him. Seun, can you give us your openings?
Hello, everybody. My name is Seun Kuti. I'm sorry I put off my video because I realized I think it was slowing down my connection. So I kind of put it off. It's an internet for you. So I'm the protest. I'm at the moment the national convener of the Niger resistance movement, and also the pro tem chairman of the Movement of the People. We started Niger resistance movement about 10 years ago because for the fundamental reason that we realized that it is impossible for a nation to be greater than the consciousness of its people. You know, no nation can truly be greater than the consciousness, both political and social consciousness of the people of that country. And whatever you see, whatever level that country is developmentally, is in direct correlation with the level of consciousness of the people of that country. So if Nigeria is the way it is today, it is basically because of the level of consciousness, both politically and social, of the Nigerian people. And if Africa is the way it is today, it is because of the level of consciousness of the African people. And not to say that this means the African people are innately stupid or lack consciousness. It's because they've been deliberately kept in the dark. You know, our elites, both political and business elites in Africa, are very adept at using the institutions of influence. I'm talking about media and entertainment, education and religion. These three biggest institutions that influence people, you know, the soft power that create culture and what is acceptable in society. You know, they are able to corrupt these institutions to serve their will only, thereby giving people only the narrative of the elites, thereby keeping the consciousness of the people low. You know, and that's what we've really been working on as the Niger resistance movement. And we believe in political and social evangelism, meaning that we go on the streets, door to door, to try and wake people up with information and also how to connect or engage with the platform. But then it's not easy really, because many people think social media is so important and big in Africa. I'm not of that opinion, because, you know, like even this event, the larger percentage of Africans that need whatever we are doing here cannot afford the data to be on this event with us, both male and female, you know. So for me, it is now how to get to reach all these people when all the platforms that should inform them have been corrupted or bought out, and people are being sold point of views, epistemologies as facts. You know, so this for me was one of the biggest problems and challenges we have to face as African people, and that's why the Niger resistance movement exists. But in the process of existing, we also realize that there's nothing we can do without political power. That the charity way, the NGO way, this our obsession with being good people. I'm doing air quotes right now. I'm sure you can see me. This our obsession with being good people was actually a way to pacify our own egos while maintaining the status quo. Because until we begin the status quo in itself as African people, which means wresting political power away from these people, there's nothing we can make. I mean, I always ask people that want us to do charity and NGOs, like in my country alone, there are 120 young people in poverty. How many can you lift out with your donations or your, 60 years we've been doing this, look at where we are. So we came up with the decision to create the movement of the people. We're not create, to reignite the movement of the people, which was my father's political party in the 70s. That wasn't registered by the authorities then. And I'm glad to say that since we embarked on this journey, I found so much willing volunteers among the people of this country, male, female, young, old, you know, and we found a lot of support from the heart of the Nigerian people also that want to see an alternative platform that will help them bring about their own potential as human beings, you know. So for me, those are the platforms that we stand on at the moment and what we're doing in terms of organizing the people. So yeah. that's basically it.
Thank you, Seun. Thank you for that. I like that in just the first few minutes of this panel, we're talking about the digital divide that exists, and it's a very important issue when you talk about grassroots mobilization, because again, the grassroots may not be on social media. Now, Mr. Jake, we'll be moving over to you. Would like to hear from you, very briefly as well, what led to your starting the movement, what you're trying to do, and how you're.
Thank you so much, and thank you, my fellow speakers or panelists and audience who are listening to us. I am humbled, but yet honored to be part of this great audience. Let me take us back, everyone on this call today. Let me take us back to the very time that you were born, that I was born. We all cried, and everyone around us rejoiced. We must live our lives so well now that we are alive, that the day will die, we will rejoice, and everyone around us will cry. That's a life of contribution. Whose life have you impacted to bring a meaningful change? With that said, I have another 4 minutes to wrap up. I want to tell my story. I remember as a young child, just about 2 years, I went to the stream to have a bath like every other person. And then my father called me. I ran out of the stream. I'm a village boy. I ran out of the stream and I was running to answer my father's call and ran into a tree that I didn't see. And I began to ask questions. I asked my father, why did I not see the tree? And my father said to me, Jake, you are different. He's not educated, so he doesn't even know anything about albinism. To him, he had a child that is completely different, that everybody has to look at, that everybody has to make jest of. And I had to live with that story even till this day. And that's when I began to ask questions. Who am I? Why am I different? I can also forget another very intriguing story. The story of how my beautiful mother could identify with me, could not give me the motherly care because she was under pressure by the society. She alienated me practically. I had to suck my father's breast. I had to live with a stepmother. And yet, I loved my mother until she passed on. Because she wasn't responsible. It was the society. The society that gave her the impression she had a child she couldn't put up with. This is my story. And that's what challenged me to do what I'm doing now. So let me tell you a little bit about our grassroots trajectory. I started Albino Foundation in 2006. I was a comfortable businessman. I had everything going for me. But yet I had this passion that I must not leave the society that I met the way I met it. I wanted a change. I wanted to stop people calling me Oyibo Pepe. I wanted to go to school. I wanted education. I wanted to be successful. I was told by my brothers, you know how it is when your siblings are playing with you. They said to me, you will not get a woman. No woman will marry you. Well, I'm a Christian. I believe in the intervention of the Almighty God. And of course, today, God is ironic. God gave me a more prettiest wife. My wife more beautiful than all of my brother's wife, And so this is what is responsible for where I am today. We have moved the needle from the days where persons with albinism are taken advantage of to a situation today, persons with albinism are brought on the table to talk and decide what their future will be. One of our milestone story, as I round up, is the fact that we were able to get the government to begin to listen to us. And because of the success of what we've done, we have further moved our grassroots intervention to meet with the needs of persons with disability. And we work in electoral space, we've worked in political space, we've worked in and social space, and we're working also in the digital space. And today, persons with disability can find their place. God bless you.
Thank you so much for that, Jake. Very, very interesting. Now, over to you, Joey, very briefly, the same questions. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And again, it's an honor to be here and part of this panel. So, I mean, as you said in the introduction, as a young person, I've always been involved with youth movements from a very, very young age. I grew up in Zimbabwe, and as part of the Jewish community there, youth movements are a very normal and natural thing. And it was, for me, only much later when I was living in South Africa and I went to university in South Africa, and the country was experiencing the HIV and AIDS pandemic, in which large numbers of people were dying of AIDS and medicines were not available. And as a student, I got involved in an organization called the Treatment Action Campaign, which was beginning to organize to lobby government to adopt a treatment program. And I mean, in many ways, it mirrors the COVID crisis that we're in now. You know, it really required people to get organized and to make demands, and pharmaceutical companies all of the power. We know also that South Africa is one of the most unequal countries in the world. You know, that 93% of all wealth is held by 10% of the population. So people who were wealthy could access the drugs, and people who were poor were dying. But out of that process came a movement that was able to build a grassroots base, able to use the media effectively, that was able to use community organizing and build coalitions and get people out onto the street, and actually use the law to advance justice. And through that, I was very inspired by what I saw. And we know that South Africa today has one of the largest antiretroviral programs in the world, and the pandemic has been slowing and has come to control as a result of people getting involved. And so through that experience and taking my experiences as a youth organizer with some of the activists from the Treatment Action Campaign, we thought, can this be done for youth? Can this be done in education? And, you know, to relate to what you were saying earlier, it was very much a question in our minds as founders of Equal Education. How do we sustain movements beyond just protest? How do we build something deeper? And it speaks to something you were saying as well, Seun, about raising consciousness. So we started a youth group with a very small number of high school students in Khayelitsha, and which is a township in South Africa outside of Cape Town. And we started to talk with young people, bring them together, get them organized, understand what's going on in their schools. And together, we were able to build a movement that started to raise consciousness, started to build the capacity of young people to get their voices heard, and to begin to understand policy, begin to understand how the state systems function and how we can hold them accountable. And I think really the one message that I want to put out there is that, and it's been said before, is that if you want to have influence, if young people want to have influence, we've got to build power. And that is that's what our work was about. And Equal Education, as a movement of over 7,000 members today, has taken the government to court many times, but has selected strategic places of where we can leverage that power to create change. So probably one of the biggest victories since 2008, when the organization was founded, is a legally enforced court order that forces the government to invest in improved infrastructure in the poorest areas. And it's really, for me, as part of my story, as someone who has never been denied opportunities, someone who was able to go to university, was able to go to school, and Equal Education was a way for me to join hands with young people, build friendships with them, build comradeship with them, and deploy privilege in a way that could advance justice. And I'll leave it there.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Joey. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Seun. Thank you, Esther. I think it's been very useful for everyone, to hear about you, and I encourage the audience to start to ask questions, based on what they've heard about the background of the speakers. You can use the question and answer feature to ask your questions. You can start from now. And I'd also like to remind you that the hashtag for this summit is the LSE Africa Summit 2021, I believe. I think the organizers can add that in the chat box to remind you. And feel free to take a screenshot of what you're seeing and, add comments on social media. So we're going to move very quickly in the actual questions now. And I'll be starting with you, Esther. We've already started to speak about this a bit, but then we know that collective organizing can look very different from social movements. I reckon that some of us may not even know that they are different things. And it can also look different from civil society organizations as well as from NGOs. Why have you chosen the particular mode of participation that you are using to drive social change? And do you still feel like this is the best way to in participation? So you started very early, from when you were 17. Has your mind changed, over time, in terms of the kinds of platforms that you're using and the way that they work for your cause?
Thank you, Teniola, for that question. It's been really amazing learning from the other speakers as well. And I would have to say that when I started when I was 17, that's about 10 years ago, I was very optimistic and very wide-eyed. I put my energies into digital advocacy, and I was very hopeful for what that would bring. But as time went by, I started to see the limitations that come in, not only with the digital gender divide, but also with being a young woman, a young activist, a young immigrant, or a Black woman from an African country. So I'm joining from Lusaka, Zambia. And what I've seen is that throughout my journey, youth movements and young people have not been trusted with the resources and with the knowledge to be the change that we want to be. There is a lot of dictating from a top-down way of how we can solve our own issues. And this has actually created a lot more problems. And because of this way of working, I thought that's how things are. But as I learned more and as I challenged myself, I realized that we actually have the power to change things. We have to put our human dignity first. And if we acknowledge our human dignity in the spaces that we're in, then we should not allow anyone to take advantage of our communities or allow us. There is, I think I'll put it this way, there is a challenge where one person from a community comes up and this person becomes the spokesperson, almost like a puppet for the community. And that's something that I have been very conscious about not doing, not speaking for my community, but rather making sure that everything I do comes from the bottom. Always come.
Esther, are you there?
Yeah, sorry. And this is why I'm always campaigning for an open internet and open leadership principles. So why I'm very excited about the Action Coalition for Technology and Innovation, which is being led by Mexico, France, and UN Women, is that there is a multi-stakeholder approach in this. And we do have a timeline. We have 5 years in which to achieve our goals, so that within 5 years, you could come and say, Esther, you say that in 5 years, you're going to breach the gender digital divide by 50%. Have you done it? In the past, we've seen that the timelines are too long, but hopefully by working with governments, international organizations, in collaboration with Grassroots, we can make sure that a collective and multi-stakeholder way of working allows us to put our human dignity at the center and allow us to co-create solutions that are working for all of us. So that will be my brief answer to your question. Thank you so much.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Esther. And I think I should confess that I'm a big fan of yours, reading your profile, everything that you're doing. I think it's amazing. I'm going to move to Jake now. Esther has spoken a bit about, what platform she's using and some of the targets that she sets and how she's working to achieve them. I know that you've done, similar things and you have set similar targets. And I know that often there are challenges with achieving those targets. So I'd like to ask you specifically, what have been some of the main challenges that you faced? How has, for example, the work that you're trying to do with the Nigerian National Assembly to improve the inclusivity of the electoral process in Nigeria, how has that gone? What are the main, forms of resistance that you have met, and how have you tried to navigate them?
Thank you very much. Well, for me, there are challenges. You cannot ignore the fact that there are challenges, but those challenges are actually my motivation. They motivate me to create a change. For instance, of course, especially here in Nigeria and all over the world, albinism is a huge challenge. We meet all kinds of discrimination and stigmatization, myth and all that. But to me, that's actually a platform that gives me the opportunity to rise to the occasion, because I don't want to leave this generation the same way I met it. So with that said, yes, there are legislative challenges. For instance, the current Electoral Act, the 2010 Electoral Act, has it, of course, it doesn't have anything to do with albinism. Nothing was mentioned about albinism. But of course, when we started intervening through the lens of disability inclusion, I am actually the convener of Disability Inclusion Nigeria. Which is a movement. It's not a project, it's a movement. It's a movement that is galvanizing leaders within the community of persons with disability to rise to the occasion and fight for themselves and forget the mundane charity model of handouts, but begin to see that disability is a right and you have a right to exist and you insist on your right. So we recognize that there was a gap, in the Electoral Act. For instance, there's a clause, clause 56, that says that INEC may accommodate the needs of persons with disability. And I'm not a lawyer, but when I saw that, I knew that automatically that takes away the mandate, the authority that is given to INEC to intervene for persons with disability. And for us, we began to insist that that clause must be reversed. And instead of may, we have shall. And of course, there are other clauses of reasonable accommodation, clauses that we've been advocating for priority voting, where a situation where persons with disability, when they go to the polling booth, or polling unit, they are given the first place to vote and to go. And the reason is simple, is obvious. Many of them suffer all kinds of disability. For instance, persons with albinism I am a survivor of skin cancer. It takes just 10 minutes for us to burn in the sun, and consistent burning leads to skin cancer. And skin cancer is a very expensive illness. Okay, so with that said, we've been able to push, not in totality, not everything we wanted, but we've made reasonable progress by driving the clauses and components of the electoral provision that would enhance the participation of persons with disability in the electoral process into the current 2020-21 Electoral Act that is being tabled before the National Assembly, which I know that the president will eventually sign into law. So we have that. One of our greatest challenge, as I round up, because I want to give others the opportunity to also contribute, is data. The issue of data in not only in Nigeria but across Africa. We are sometimes we are a laughing stock in national fora where we begin to say, oh, take for instance, I just finished the National Council on Education, and we're still quoting 2010 figure by UNESCO about in and out of school children. They said 10.5 million. That's not accurate. And as long as we keep putting out this false information, the community that will come to our aid will never respond to our needs. So in the electoral process, we are mining data of eligible persons with disability, so that, and it's so unique because it's presented in an aggregated format. Let me explain that. What it is that we go to a particular community and there is, let's say, 20 polling units. What we do is we go to those 20 polling units and mine data of several shades of persons with disability, including albinism, and of course albinism is a disability. You know, we mine those data and take those data and arm INEC so that INEC will know where to deploy much needed resources. In other words, if in polling unit A, B, there is no persons with albinism, there's no point deploying magnifying glasses. So yeah, so those are some of the things that we're doing in the electoral space. Thank you.
Thank you. That is incredible. We can't act if we don't even know what is going on. So we absolutely need data to even, make some of the changes that we need to make. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to go over to Joey now very quickly. So Joey, I've read about the things that you've read and some of the things that you've said. I saw your comments on, for example, I think 3 main things when you're trying to drive change. There's issue selection, there's plaintiff selection, and then social mobilization. But actually, I'd like you to comment on this in the sense of the way COVID may have affected the framing of your cause, so the COVID pandemic. But then there are a few side issues that I would really love to hear your thoughts on as well. So first of all, I know that you've made some comments on a potential new protest law in the UK and how that may be affecting things, and how maybe that is one of the side effects, if you want to call it that, of the COVID pandemic and the way that our governments have been behaving. So it'll be great to hear from you on how it has affected your work.
Sure. Well, I think as you've said, I work primarily in education, but really at the intersection of where young people can be accessing education, where they are exploited and vulnerable and socially excluded in different parts of the world. And we know that across Africa, across India, across some of the poorest parts of the world, the lockdowns have interrupted education, and the impacts of that have been greatest for the poorest. I mean, we've talked earlier about the lack of access to stable internet connections and the lack of access to governments who have the ability and the political will to make education available to young people. And we know that that is not happening. And we know also that that young people, particularly girls, have been exposed to high levels of violence as a result of not being in school. We know that the most marginalized young people who rely on the school system and the state system to get a single meal each day, but by not being in school, they're not able to access that. So of course, we know that the pandemic is going to set back progress on ending poverty, reducing poverty. It's setting back progress on young people's opportunities in the world. And though that is a very, very deep crisis. I'll also say, you know, as far as the COVID-19 crisis is being used to limit civic and political freedom, we've seen this across Africa. We saw it in Nigeria. We've seen students, a student like Alan Moyo, who is an activist with the Zimbabwean Student Union, the ZINASU, who, as a young person calling for access to education, was detained for 79 days. And we know that other activists before him have gone missing and have never been found. So we have a very repressive regimes are using the COVID-19 pandemic as a way to limit the ability to organize and to restrict our political freedoms. And we're seeing that, as you mentioned, here in the UK. And there's a law that is currently on the statute books here in the UK, where if you are the organizer of a protest, and if you cause an annoyance to the population by bringing people together to express legitimate concerns, you can be jailed for up to 10 years, which is really incredible when you think about it. And of course, these are the fundamentals of our democratic freedoms, and I think they need to be struggled for very hard. And of course, they need to be struggled for in as broad a way as possible. And I think that is starting to happen. I mean, there's been quite a strong response to that here in the UK. So I hope that's answering your question.
Absolutely, you know, and we've seen it in so many countries in the world. Like you've said, during this pandemic period, the charges that were brought against a lot of protesters was breaking COVID protocols, even when they were not. And then the worries that they are also attempting to consolidate some of this newfound power that they have. So thank you for that response. Again, I'm reminding everyone that you can use the Q&A feature to ask questions. And yes, it's useful if you specify who you'd like to answer your question. Now, Seun, we're talking about very serious things, but then in Nigeria, we have a saying, you know, try to enjoy, problem that they finish. So the fight never ends, but then we find ways to make it fun or to make it more enjoyable or to just make it more appealing for other people to join. I know that you're very passionate about the Black social movement, and over the past few months, we've seen a reemergence, you know, sort of, and it's oftentimes organized by the young digital demographic. For Nigeria, I like to call them the Nigeria Twitter demographic. And it's not just in Africa, but across the entire world. How do you explain these developments? And do you see a connection between the global struggle towards liberation and the demand for local needs in grassroots activism? Just to add to that, when the EndSARS protest was happening, I felt like drew some lessons from the Black Lives Matter protests that happened, you know, around the world, which I also joined while I was in London. And then when Free Senegal happened, I could see that they also drew some, you know, some learning from the EndSARS protest and what happened there. So it's of new Pan-Africanism, you can say that. So over to you, Seun.
For me, it's very important that as motherland people all over the world, also we see the uniqueness of our situation as well. You know, in Nigeria, you know, for example, you know, I find that a lot of our organizing, as you said, is by young people. And this doesn't necessarily have to be so. because I believe that a very important demographic in the liberation of any people are the professionals. And the problem with that the NSAS had, you know, I didn't really follow the Senegal movement, that even Black Lives Matter has in the West, is that too many African professionals are aligned with the oppressor. Too many African professionals are aligned with the oppressor. So when you look at NSAS movement, for example, in Nigeria, the Nigerian professional class did not go on strike in solidarity with the young people of Nigeria. Just the way you never hear the Nigerian working professionals go on strike because young people are dying in the hospital because of $5 medicine, or children cannot attend public schools, or the fact that our universities are closed down for months on end. If you look at Black Lives Matter, for example, I use Colin Kaepernick as a very good example of the relationship between struggle and professionals in the Black African global motherland community. Colin Kaepernick started kneeling down like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, taking a knee, right? Some people joined him, some didn't. Later, everybody fell off and left him on his own. He lost everything. But now, all players are kneeling down. And they are kneeling down because their boss says, okay, to kneel down. The more African professionals in every, no matter how high up we are in the food chain, the more we wait for our boss to be comfortable with us taking a knee on behalf of our people, the harder it will be for us to properly organize. And that's what I truly draw, you know, as similarities in the movement. People look at the organizational aspect of the movement and draw those kind of similarities. But because I don't want us to continue doing the same things our ancestors have done, our forefathers have done, then our grandfathers have done it, then our fathers have done it, and we want to continue doing the same thing, especially when people are praising us for our organizational skills, as if Kwame Nkrumah did not organize the liberation of the whole country without mail, without social media, without aeroplane access as we have today. You know, we continue to give ourselves this pat on the back for being able to achieve minimal things like protest. You understand what I'm saying? But what I truly draw is that now in Nigeria, for example, why did everybody pull out? What killed the NSAS protest at the end of the day? What killed the NSAS protest, like even the Black Lives Matter movement, is that many professionals in our community still respect property over lives of people. So all any government in the world has to do when Black people are agitating is to create violence that affects, not when it affects the protesters. Protesters can be killed all week, arrested, beaten up, silence. You know, when you are protesting, that's what you should expect. But as soon as one car is burnt or one shop is looted or one building is razed down, everybody loses their minds. Oh, this is gone out of hand, this is gonna... But people are dying and you don't say things have gone out of hand. You understand? African people are dying or are being killed or are dying avoidable deaths by the millions every week. And nobody says things have gone out of hand. Look at the pollution in the seas, in the rivers, the deforestation in the rainforests all over the world. In Nigeria, when I was growing up as a kid and you're traveling in the southwest, all you see is green. Now, everything is destroyed without any policy to replenish these things. Nobody says things have gone out of hand. But as soon as you burn one useless building that doesn't serve the interest of the community, but the interest of some selfish capitalists, everything has gone out of hand. But we forget as motherland people that in this system, we are the only group that were not invited to the table. For anything that we have accomplished as motherland people in this system that we exist under has been born out of political struggle. So the engagement of the Nigerian professionals and the African professionals, motherland professionals all over the world, and their lack thereof is what I see that connects the struggle of black people all over the world, because it's what brings our struggles to its demise. Because even no matter how much youth organize, youth do not have the resources or the clout in society to really make change. I've not seen any society, any country that was built by youth. The energy of the youth is necessary, but the experience of the elders is also necessary.
Yeah.
So this narrative was also creating a political divide, like, oh, youth, the youth. The youth are not the solution of any society. The youth are a reflection of their society. You know what I'm saying? So that for me is what I see as a connect in our struggles. The disengagement of the African professional class, because maybe they feel that they have secured their own piece of the pie, but it is fleeting. If we look at the statistics generationally, yes, they will use you till you are 50, 60, and by the time you wake up and smell the coffee, you've had nothing.
You're right.
In 1979, salary in Nigeria was $500 for a manager, 700 naira a month, $500. Today is 180,000, 200,000. It's still $500. It is still $500.
Seun, I agree with you absolutely.
So
and
that's what I see as what connects our struggles, and what we as so-called professionals, both in media, in banking, and in all these institutions, must begin to look at and see how we can begin to engage. It is not enough for a handful of us to engage the system and build a bridge between the youths, you know. No, it is the duty of many of us.
I agree. It's a question of solidarity, you know, and how we build it across, you know, different demographics, people that may or may not be affected by the issue. And your comments have even caused me to reflect personally, because I've heard you say on a different platform how education is one way of making someone that should be part of a movement think that they're rather part of the establishment. So how to reflect on our positionalities and how that may affect things. So we want to give the audience opportunity to answer questions. I'm seeing that there are a lot of questions. We're going to start with Bridget Oha Randuku. So Bridget Oha Randuku from the Sheffield Business School. She has a question for you, Joey, and it's about young people and their ability to build influence. So she's saying that you said, you know, for young people to build influence, they must build power. And how can young people build power, especially in Africa, where we have a culture of ageism? And I think this is going to segue very, very nicely from what Seun has been telling us. Bridget, is your hand raised? If you raise, I think I've read out the question for you, so I think Joey can go ahead and answer it if that's okay.
All right, let me respond to that. I mean, also just briefly to link that to some of what Seun was saying, and I know that he's not, he's not trying to put young people down. I'm not trying to do that, and we've got to find a bridge. You're absolutely right. But if we want to take one example of where young people have shaped the course of a whole country, you can look at the uprising of 1976. I think in South Africa, the apartheid system would never have been smashed. All hope was lost. The regime was too powerful, too much military. Things would never have changed had young people in 1976 not made the sacrifices that they did and risen up as they did. And, you know, to give you an example, in so many of the social movements in South Africa today, if you look at the leadership, they are all leaders, student leaders from the 1976 period. So a lot of the ANC leaders, the UDF leaders, and my point is that it doesn't, revolutionary power doesn't change things in an instant. It takes a long time and for leaders to be built. So it's a long struggle. So that's the opening to my answer to you, Bridget, that I think it is a long struggle. But how do we build that power to answer it quickly? If you look at the example of equal education, we need spaces where we can build friendships, where we can build solidarities between young people, where it is safe to look out who we are, to talk about our problems, to begin to understand where each other are coming from, and then find ways that we can act together. And so my advice about how do we build power is really to reflect on the past. I mean, for us, it started with young people pointing to broken windows and infrastructure in their school. I mean, in a single school, you had hundreds of windows broken, and in the winter, it was extremely cold to try and have lessons in that kind of an environment. But when students could point to that problem and begin to connect up with high school students, other schools, where they could meet together, where they could read history and see that there's nothing stopping them organizing for change, they then started to petition. They wrote letters to the newspaper. And eventually organized a protest. And that protest was just a part of the broader strategy. But they managed to get a minister to commit the money to fix all of those windows. And that tiny, tiny victory is an example of where you build power. And that core group went on to develop as leaders. And then old, people like me could leave the movement. And, it's a movement that I've left now. I left the movement in 2012. And there are much sharper, stronger leaders in the movement. In fact, Equal Education today has an all-female leadership of young Black women who are taking the movement forward in really powerful ways. So you have new campaigns and you have new power that comes from small victories. So I hope that answers your question.
I know I have even learned that, so thank you so much for that, Joey. Aishatu Saeed, you have a question for Jake. Do you have your hand raised? Do you want to ask him directly? It seems like a direct personal question. Is Aishatu able to speak? Okay, I'll read out the question. She's asking, since you started to stand up for albinos in Nigeria, have you ever encountered any case similar to yours?
Oh, yes. Just like we have the same color, we literally have the same problem. And I'm glad my colleague here has been talking about education. I sat and midwifed the inclusive education policy for Nigeria. I was the chairman of the drafting committee, and that policy is being implemented by SiteSaver right now in Nigeria. I contributed to South Africa. I contributed to Namibia through the British government. It's important to take to heart really what everybody is saying here. But to answer directly to the person who asked question, yes, we do have a common problem. We have site issues. We have issues with discrimination. We have issues with relational abuse. We have issues with struggling to go to school because we can't see the blackboard. It's a common problem where even families will abuse. So it's a common problem. But then, like I said, I don't live in a pity party situation. I want to see change. And I think in my lifetime, I've seen a little bit of change, but we are working and building the structure that would introduce a lasting change. In the next 5 years, things are not going to be the same. And we're doing that through the media, everything. I identify with some of the things that Seun said about youth movement. I believe in it, and we have a youth arm. But it's also important that these youth begin to think strategically and start without a very potent achievement. Yes, there's some level of consciousness. Government had to readjust and all that, and I'm patient to see result. But if we need to work strategically, strategy is always better than energy. We need to work strategically, know when to move, know when to stop. You know, you retreat, you surrender, you retreat, you surrender. So it's important that we work strategically. I love strategy. I'm a strategy and policy person. I love strategy. Where there is no policy, I introduce one. Where there is a policy, I want to see what are the gaps. How can we fill the gaps? You know? So it's something that we need to begin to think holistically and not necessarily trying to apportion blame, but understanding that we must be the change that we want to see. You know, the aged has a responsibility. The youth has a responsibility. I believe that we need to allow the youth to fill the generational gap and begin to groom them. But we also have a problem where the youths are given the opportunity and they abuse it. So we have to balance the equation and achieve the success that is enduring.
I see what you're saying, and it's very true. We need solidarity across age classes, across income classes, you know, across the digital divide as well. It's very important. I think that we may even be able to draw lessons from the last American elections. There was some organizing that happened during those elections that I think that some of us that are trying to do similar things should look at. You know, everyone was forced to get involved one way or the other, whether you were 7 years old or you were 35 years old or you had just turned 21 or 18. So I agree with you that we need to bring everyone into the conversation. There's a question for Seun, and again, if you'd like to speak your question, so if you'd like to say your question, you need to use your hand as well as include the question in the chat. But here there's a question from Abbas Yusuf. Esther, you're back. I'm glad to see you. I was getting worried for a bit. But then Seun, he'd like to know, you know, because you spoke about the importance of wresting political power from office holders, and it requires a great deal of funding, particularly in Nigeria. But what partnerships or initiatives has your organization thought of to solve this? Have you considered incorporating the financial strength of the diaspora to assist grassroots movements? Over to you, Seun.
Before I answer the question, I'll just really come back to Joey real quick. I didn't say young people cannot shape the course of history in a nation. I didn't say young people cannot shape a nation. One man can shape a nation. A baby can shape a nation. Shaping a nation is because of circumstance, incidents, anything can happen and it shapes the nation. I said build a nation. Build, you know, and I felt it's a bit of a stretch for you to say I was trying to put young people down. You know, there was nothing I said there that put young people down. I don't think that statement needed to come into the conversation. Now, that being said, real quick, we have a lot of affiliations with international organizations, both educational and political. We are working with, even the MOP right now is a whole bunch of organizations coming together under one umbrella. You know, and in terms of finances, we just were able to, we just secured our accounts. You know, because maybe we'll need the strength of not only Nigerians in the diaspora, but motherland people all over the world, you know, in terms of being able to fund what we're trying to achieve here. You know, and we've been getting a lot of feedback, even from members already, because, you know, MOP is about 9,000 strong already. So even the members are eager to see what they can do. But for me, what is most important is that we have solidarity with, you know, the Nigerian professionals in general, you know, to be able to give their expertise and their time to the liberation, you know, which is much more than money. to throw money at something because it makes you feel better is not enough to solve this situation that we are in as motherland people. It's something that we have to also engage in, engage with to a certain extent. So I think in the broad prospect of collaborations and assistance, financial is the least of it. It's part of it is important, but what we need is that also commit, people also engage, because it is the strength of that engagement, that can bring about any change we can see. We can throw any kind of money at the problem, but if there's no engagement, if there's no camaraderie, between the classes of the working poor and working professionals of Nigeria, for example, then we will not really make headway. Like NSAS protests, what happened in NSAS protests? Oh, I think
we can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me. Okay, what happened in NSAS protests was that we forgot that the majority of young people themselves in Nigeria cannot afford data. And many of the organizing for the protest was happening online. So many of these poor people were not carried along by young professionals. Young professionals already abandoned poor young professionals or poor young people, And we forgot that we had to organize them to let them know what was going on by approaching their neighborhoods, But they also had a right to show that they were angry with the system. They also had a right to show that, the system was failing them, not because we could afford data and transport ourselves to Lekki or wherever we were doing it in the city, that we felt we were the only ones that had the legitimate right to protest. You understand? So I think these are the things that we as modern people need to now come together to see how we can use our incredible depth of talent, and expertise to solve. So I think for me that's what's most important, even more than having the financial support of the diaspora.
Yeah, I hear you, and everything is important. So engagement, financial support. I know that something that helped sustain the protest, the NSAS protest and the Free Senegal protest, was the donations that came in, also probably primarily from the diaspora, and did contribute. But then engagement is more important, and solidarity. So even if you feel like you're not the person that is looting a supermarket, you need to be able to understand why that person is doing that and focus on that issue and not just the destruction of property. No one wants that. Then let's understand that there are very real grievances that need to be addressed. Esther, I think you're back with us. I'm very glad. I was getting
exactly,
very, yes. And just to say, yes, sorry, Seun, just because we're running out of time a bit, just to say that, one of the challenges with doing things over the internet is that meaning gets lost. So I think that may have happened between you and Joy, but then I'm glad that, it's sorted. There are no issues there. I want to quickly move to Esther. So Esther, there's a question here about, someone in the African diaspora. They're interested in moving to their country of origin to pursue a career in social policy, to advocate for greater freedom, human rights, and equality for women. What steps can they take towards pursuing this career?
Thanks. That's an amazing question. And I do see that there is need for collaboration for those in the diaspora and those on the ground. And mostly the issue, even with us on the ground, for me, is that we have to unlearn a lot of what we know and always tap into the local knowledge, first of all, and make our approaches intersectional. And this is a work in progress. No one is perfect. And if you're looking to move
to are you there?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, you can hear you now.
Yeah. So I was saying that we always have to decenter ourselves as activists and try and tap into the local knowledge to make sure that we're not replicating what has already been done and that we're actually bringing something valuable, something that cannot be found on the ground. And as feminists, intersectional feminists, we have to make sure that we are bringing in the voice of the grassroots, so working in collaboration with those on the ground. The thing with working in international organizations is that sometimes the responses are top down rather than bottom up. So you have to be conscious when you're going into this space. How are you engaging with the locals and what does lasting change look like? And this can be as simple as creating a pathway to keep yourself accountable and to make sure that the way that you engage will be responsive to the needs on the ground? Thanks for that amazing question.
Thank you, Esther. So by my calculations, and I hope I am right, we started this panel by 11:20, and since it's a 75-minute panel, we have until 12:35 to finish. So for is that right?
Hey, Tenny, if I might just comment quickly. Hi, this is David, part of the organizing team. And I would first of all like to thank everyone who's made an amazing contribution. Those were some amazing insights. Me personally, I was just doing my most to try to take everything in. And I would just like to let you guys know that since we overrun a bit, it's fine, considering that also previous sessions have overrun slightly. And I would like to let you also know that it's fine if you take maybe 1 or 2 questions in. So maybe until 1:45. Also to let everyone know the policy workshop won't be happening due to logistical considerations. We want to make sure that we do not rush the subsequent sessions that are going to happen after the lunch break. I don't know for everyone else, I need a lunch break to not just get some food in, but also to make sure to digest all the input that has happened so far. I think we've had some amazing input, yeah, the lunch break will happen. And from 2 p.m. we'll then continue with Out of the Revolution, and be prepared to expect some more amazing sessions such as climate change and womanhood, and more to come tomorrow, obviously. So I would just like to chime that in again for everyone's input. Please, Tenny, feel free to take in 1 or 2 more questions, maybe until 1:45. Then we have the lunch break, and then we'll continue back.
All right, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, David. I'm glad because there's still a couple more questions here that it would be good to try to answer. The next one is from Beverly Mademba. Beverly, do you have your hand raised? Do you want to ask this question yourself? I can see the raised hands, so others. We'll start with Beverly. She has a question for you, Joey. She says she appreciated your authenticity in stating that you are deploying privilege to achieve justice. How are you able to come to this balance? In other words, not denying the privilege that you hold while engaging. And what are the strategies for deploying privilege? Very quickly from you, Joey.
Sure. I saw that comment from you, Beverly, and I really appreciate that. I think it's a hard thing. I think, and in some ways, it speaks to what Seun was saying as well about getting the professional classes involved, and where the resources are needed at the grassroots. People are much more, I don't want to say disempowered, but the channels, the levers of power that they have access to are much, much smaller. And somehow when you begin to be successful and you become a professional, your interests begin to change. And then people become alienated often from where people are at and where problems are being experienced. So I think the one thing I would say is people need to learn to listen. I think people need to learn to step back and listen to the lived experiences of the injustices that we face and think about how to be an ally. And certainly for me, as a man and as a white man, it's been, one's got to learn how to do that. And organizations that I have founded have faced very deep problems of gender inequalities and class inequalities and racism that experiences, we can't think that our organizations or that ourselves are something separate from these injustices that occur. We often find them inside our organizations and we need to challenge them. So that's another one that I would say. Yeah, I mean, and I think how we do it is really finding ways. I agree. I mean, social media is one place where we can get involved, but I think also linking up with others who are experiencing similar problems and are interested in similar issues. You need to get together with people, and those solidarities, I think, are the answer to the very alienated society that we can sometimes find ourselves within.
Thank you, Joey. Meron Benti from the University of Cambridge, you have a question for us. I haven't seen the question in the chat, but then I think the mic will be handed to you. I think she. Meron, are you there? Can you hear us? Meron? I'm not sure Meron can hear us. Meron, perhaps you want to type your question in the Q&A box so that we can answer it. Well, we can't hear you, sorry. Can we try with Diane? I think Diane has a question for you. I think there may be some challenges. So I remember seeing Diane's question in the chats. Let me see if I can pull it up very, very quickly. Seun, you have, I don't know if you've had a look at the chats, but then you have a lot of questions, a lot of interesting questions here. Yeah, Meron says that they're having challenges with their mic, so they will type in their question. And I think he's not able to connect. So there's a question from Chinonye for you, Seun. It says, she's repeating what you said about the youth and what their role is. But then she's asking, what can we do now to the elders, or about, I don't think we're trying to do anything to the elders, but then what can we do now about the elders in Nigeria that fail to understand what they need to do to make our society better? So it's the same question of engagement. How do you've made a case for the fact that we need everyone on board, but then how do we actually get, these other groups that may not feel that they can identify with what we're going through? How do we get them to support the movement?
I think generally there's a certain that people get to in an oppressive society. I don't know. I think reading Paulo Ferre's The Pedagogy of the Oppressed might give one little insight into how, oppressors and oppressors in waiting, so there are certain people in society that would never engage with liberation movements, and I think one of the problems we have as oppressed people all over the world is that we tend to wait for those people to understand us before we make moves. As I just said about professional athletes, when I see African footballers, kneeling down in Europe for Black Lives Matter, while they come to Africa and shake hands with our oppressors, our parents, and all our oppressors here, but they are willing to kneel for Black Lives Matter in Europe, but they don't do anything for justice, for all the injustice that happens in their own motherland countries in Africa. So for me, basically, we need to move with those that want to move with us. We generally cannot wait for those in society that feel, everything is okay and they are happy with the way things are. So we that believe that things must change are the ones that must come together to move. And it's difficult to find one another. For me now, I'm happy to find Jake's organization on this platform today. And it's surprising that I'm in Nigeria. I didn't know about it. I would want to liaise with him now to see how maybe MOP can work with this organization and see what we can do politically with disabled people, in general, because we've been looking for avenues to do that. And that's what I say about the media as professionals here, that organizations like this are not put in the forefront of people's attention. you know, of people's psyche. The people doing the real work to bring change to society are not put in the forefront of people's psyche. And because we also, as social organizations, as political movements that are people and grassroots oriented, do have the funds to pay for the advertisement that will put us in the limelight, you know. So
yeah,
that's why platforms like this are also very important, you know. So yeah, for me, these are the things that generally we have to do as motherland people to bridge the divide. And also, we cannot do this African elite ideology of just throwing money at the issue, you know. That's why people always say, well, how can we donate? Yes, you donate, but you must now, what is not enough to, I always say to people, it's not enough to love Africa. You must also know Africa.
yeah.
So you throw money at us, also take time to study the real issues going on, the underlying causes, so you can see how, apart from your finances, you as well can help change the situation, you know. Because yes, I mean, I'm not a rich man, but I'm in African standards, I'm successful, you know. But giving money to the movement is not enough. I understand that. I understand I must give my time, I must engage, I must study, I must go to meetings, I must build bridges and things like that. So these habits are habits that we must now start to learn. I also say to people that we that are engaging in liberation work in Africa right now, you know, I heard one time at the Nigerian NLC, I went to a meeting, they were talking about rank and file. I was like, who is rank and file? The level of liberation movement in Africa, we are not that much that we have rank and file. If you are engaging as a young person, as an old person, as a professional, as a non-professional in Africa today, you must see yourself that you are in a leadership position. So you do the work of a leader, you must engage as a leader, you must study, you must give your time, you must, you know. So these are the things you must sacrifice.
Absolutely.
There's no one way, you know, I can't really explain it all because I don't know it all, but there's no one way, but we must try as much as possible to generally become new people, to create a new continent. We must become new people. We can't be the same people we've been since 1860 when we were first conquered.
Absolutely. Yeah, Seun, absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I think that's why we're having this conversation. You know, we're trying to learn each other, and the learning will not stop here. It will go on for a while. I'd like to encourage, you know, the audience that you can engage with the panelists directly as well. I believe that this platform, Airmeet, allows you to message them and ask them some of your questions that we may not have the opportunity to ask here. Particularly for you, Jake, I can see that you have a few fans. There's Meron Benti and then Aisha too. I think that they would like to potentially speak with you some more. But then Meron's question is about, well, what he says is that, you know, when the issue you're advocating for is so tied to your day-to-day challenges, how do you separate your identity from the work you do? How do you protect your own well-being? And I would love if you could answer that in about 1 minute so that we can have closing statements. Thank you, Jake.
How do I protect my own well-being? Listen, first and foremost, I say openly to everybody and to Nigerian government and to anyone who is listening to me, I'm not afraid to die. When I turned 60, I'm going to be turning out 60 in May. I've already have a succession plan. I have made up my mind that I wasn't going to hand over the organization I founded in my funeral, you know. So I already know a young man that I'm going to take over from me. Seun touched on a lot of things, and I want to say practically, the older generation, we need to close the leadership gap between us and the younger generation. We need to reinvent leadership, and the younger generation needs to learn character and integrity. Some of them, when you give them an opportunity, they go there for themselves. It's very obvious that NSTARS, the government was able to infiltrate it, buy over those they can buy over, and disrupted everything that was practically in place to bring a change. So even some of the youths are not honest themselves, just like the elders are most dishonest. So we need to find a generation that is willing to say that I don't care what happens to me, I care what happens to the community.
Thank you, Jake. I am sad that that Esther is not on this call. But then now, in 30 seconds, Joy, Jake, Seun, in that order, can you give us 1-2 sentences So one sentence that explains why you persist, another sentence that explains why we should persist, or that tells us why we should persist.
Okay, I would say two things. The one is that I think if we look historically, all economic development has been associated with a legitimate state system. And if we want to have change, we also, it said if there's no struggle, there's no progress. And so we need to be finding ways, I think, and I work with young people, of finding ways to hold those who control levers of power, particularly of the state, but also of corporations, to hold them to account and understand how this works. And we can only do that by raising consciousness, which I think we've talked a lot about here. But that's how we build new institutions, and how we build change. So just, it's been such an honor to be here and to learn from what other speakers have been saying in their organizations. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Jake, 30.
Well, my existence is wrapped around the vision of the organization that I founded, which is to have an inclusive society for all. So for me, this is what I go to bed, wake up wanting to see. And I think it's what every other person who is listening to me on this call and who will listen to this recording should exist for. Remember that you can only make a living with what you get, but you make life with what you give. Seun, I want to say thank you to you. Thank you to your father for all the work he had done and the legacy that you're leaving. Keep being yourself. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't bother about criticism. We will get there.
Amazing. Thank you, Jake.
Thank you very
And
much.
Seun, 30 seconds.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, for me, it's easy. It's very direct, because coming from my lineage, from my grandmother, my grandfather, my father, my mom, and now myself, my brothers, my uncles, I understand that I am a product of immense sacrifice, as are all African people. For us to be where we are today, a lot of great people have given their life, given their blood, given their time, to see us all the little rights that we have to accomplish, whatever we can accomplish in this system today. And I believe that it is my duty to pay that forward, not to sit on the opportunities that have been given, by the struggles of ancestors, but to understand that, the struggle is not over, and we need to secure the humanity and dignity of the future African people. And that is what drives me.
Thank you, Seun. Thank you, everyone. I believe we have come to the end of this panel, 2 minutes over the extra time. Again, my name is Tenny, and again, you're at the LSE Africa Summit 2021. This was a grassroots movement from the ground up panel. And you can tweet about this panel using the hashtag LSE Africa Summit 2021. Thank you, everyone. I think I'm handing over to David now.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks again. That was amazing. Also, thanks for our moderator. Done an amazing job. Just a quick announcement. We have a slight change of plans. So our speakers for the policy workshop has actually just gotten off our plane to make it to her session, which is going to be the policy workshop. But I do understand that obviously there are going to be some people like myself that need the lunch break, to chop some food and again digest the thoughts. So do feel free to do the lunch break as you wish. However, the session will start at 1:15 for those who are eager to join. Also know that throughout your lunch break and in general, you can always check out the lounge area, which will have speed networking facilities. We're blessed with technology these days, and you can literally just press a button and get connected to everyone, and the algorithm will know it's actually someone that matches your interest. So I would definitely check that out at some point as well. Also do know that we have a careers fair in our arena session, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, great. So we have a careers fair where you can check out, ongoing career opportunities, as well as check out our sponsors. And yeah, I will leave it at that. I'll close the session now, so feel free to go to a lunch break and possibly move on to the next session. Again, thank you for everyone, especially for the speakers and moderators. That was great. Awesome.
Thank you, Joey. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.